Today, we're diving into some of the most radical philosophical texts ever written. They tackle the biggest questions in life, but with a twist. They suggest the answers aren't out there in the heavens, but deep inside each and every one of us. So picture this. Thousands of years ago, in the forests of ancient India, a group of sages were wrestling with the exact same questions that can keep us up at night. You know the ones. Who am I, really? What is all this? And what in the world happens after we die? But for them, this was way more than just a late-night thought experiment. They saw life as a fundamental problem, something they called samsara, this relentless, kind of exhausting cycle of being born, dying, and being reborn, all of it fueled by our desires and, well, characterized by suffering. They weren't just looking for answers, they were looking for an emergency exit. And this desperate search for an escape route, a way out of the whole cycle, that's really where our story begins. For a really long time, the go-to solution was to look outward. The common wisdom was, you perform these super elaborate fire rituals and sacrifices to get on the good side of the gods. And the goal, well, it was to score some divine favor. Things like wealth, a good harvest, maybe a slightly better spot in the next life. But then a new generation of thinkers started to poke holes in this idea. They began to realize that all these external fixes, these temporary rewards, they didn't actually solve the root problem. It was like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. It just wasn't a permanent escape from the cycle. And this led to a massive pivot, a real game changer in intellectual history. They shifted from what they called the Karma Kanda, that's the path of external rituals, to the Jnana Kanda, which is the path of internal knowledge. The goal wasn't just about getting temporary goodies anymore. The new prize was total, permanent freedom, a state they called moksha. The whole search for truth had officially turned inward. And the writers of these new texts, the Upanishads, they did not mince words. One of them flat out calls these fancy rituals unsafe boats. The argument was that trying to cross the huge ocean of suffering in one of those things was just foolish. It would only get you stuck, going round and round in the cycle of old age and death. It was time for a new boat. So, what was this new boat? Well, the answer they came up with was absolutely mind-bending. It had nothing to do with pleasing gods out there. It was all about discovering the true nature of reality itself. Okay, so first, they came up with this concept of a single, ultimate reality that is the foundation for everything. They called it Brahman. You can think of it as the fabric of existence, the unchangeable source of everything that is. A classic way to picture it is to think of the infinite space outside a clay jar. Then, they turned their attention inward. They looked past the body, past all the thoughts and the ego, to see what was left. And what they found was this core of pure, witnessing consciousness, an immortal, true self they called the Atman. And on our little analogy, this is the space inside the clay jar. And right here, this is the great secret of the Upanishads. They made this absolutely shocking declaration. The space inside the jar and the space outside the jar, they're the same thing. Your individual consciousness, the Atman, and the reality of the entire cosmos, Brahman, are one and the same. Or to put it another way, which is just beautiful, your deepest, most essential self isn't just a tiny piece of the universe. It is the whole universe. The consciousness that's looking out through your eyes right now is the very same stuff that lights up the entire cosmos. Okay, so if we are all, at our core, the entire universe, why don't we feel that way, right? Why do we feel so small and separate and, well, temporary? The Upanishads aren't just philosophy books. They're more like practical guidebooks, full of maps to help us realize this profound truth. One of the most famous maps is this great story, the chariot allegory. So imagine this. Your true self, the Atman, is the silent passenger in a chariot. Your body is the chariot itself. Your five senses are these wild horses, always trying to pull you in different directions. Your mind holds the reins, and your intellect is the charioteer. The whole point is to train the intellect to guide the mind, which then tames the senses so the chariot can actually get to its destination, realizing who you truly are. Another text gives us a different kind of map. It's a journey through 4 states of consciousness. You know, we all cycle through the waking world, then the dream world, and then that quiet of deep, dreamless sleep. But they said there's a 4th state beyond all of them, called Turiya. It's the silent, always-on consciousness that's just watching the other 3 come and go. And the Upanishads teach that this silent witness, that's the real you. So how do you find this witness? The great sage Yajnavalkya came up with this really cool method of radical subtraction, niti-niti, which means not this, not this. The idea is, you are not your body because you can observe it. You are not your thoughts because you're aware of them. You're not your feelings because you watch them pass by. If you keep stripping away everything you are not, what you're left with is what you truly are, the pure observer. Now, what's absolutely wild is that this ancient idea didn't just stay hidden away in the forests of India. It actually traveled the globe. And over centuries, it completely reshaped modern thinking in some really surprising ways. So the journey really kicks off in the 17th century. A Mughal prince translates 50 of these texts into Persian and calls it the Great Secret. From there, it gets translated into Latin, and that's how it finally lands in the hands of European thinkers, where it just set off this intellectual firestorm. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer was one of the first to get totally hooked. He literally kept a copy of that Latin translation on his bedside table and called it the solace of my life, saying he believed it was the production of the highest human wisdom. A little later, the poet T.S. Eliot is looking at the spiritual mess of post-war Europe, and he ends his famous poem, The Wasteland, with a direct quote from the Upanishads. The answer to modern emptiness, he was basically saying, was this ancient advice: to give, to be compassionate, and to have self-control, all followed by the Sanskrit word for peace, shanti. But maybe the most shocking fan was one of the fathers of quantum mechanics, Erwin Schrödinger. He used the Upanishads to think about a puzzle in his own field. You know, how can there be billions of separate conscious minds when science says the universe is one big connected system? His answer was pure Upanishads. Consciousness is a singular. There's only one mind. And of course, back in India, this philosophy was a powerful engine for real-world change. Mahatma Gandhi based his entire principle of non-violent resistance on this very idea. Because if we're all just different expressions of the same one self, then hurting someone else is quite literally hurting yourself. So when you boil it all down, the crucial point of this entire tradition, from ancient sages to modern physicists, is this. It's about tearing down the illusion that we're small and fragile. The message isn't just that you have a soul, it's that you are that soul, that immortal, boundless spirit. And that ancient insight leaves us with a really provocative question to think about. If the ultimate reality of everything isn't some far-off thing out there, but is actually the very essence of who you are in here, what changes? What would you look for differently?